advertising it.
That's good, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's how we did it in the old days. How are you? Nice to see you. Thank you for the invitation to see a report this week.
What's that one about? Oh, that's another bit. Yes, that's. I've been collecting these from my Tokyo.
Very well, very well. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. David, looking good? Hey, Mark. Thanks. Very well. Oh, very nice. Okay. Data protection 2016. Okay.
Hey, stranger, good to see you. I'm well, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, good for you on this, and you're working with your old boss on. Yeah, I'd love to. Maybe I'll find one on eBay somewhere. Oh, so good to see you.
Are you out here just for this?
Yeah, yeah. I'm around tomorrow. I go back tomorrow night. So
Catch up.
I'd love to. No, I'd love to. Okay. Be great. I won't interfere with this. Hey, Mark. Fine, thanks.
Hello, this is a microphone test. I'm Caroline from Elon University. I hope everybody's having a great time. Thanks for letting Elon students join you and report on this great event.
That's our internet society sound.
Good morning. I think we'll go ahead and get started since it's getting to be 11 o'clock. Welcome to this discussion on the intersection between trade agreements and internet governance, a topic that is relatively new to me, but fortunately we have 5 panelists who can talk about it in great detail. My name is Doug Palmer, and I cover trade for Politico, and before that I worked for Reuters. I've been covering trade for about 16 years, but before the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I never had to pay that much attention to the digital provisions of trade agreements. I think that's largely because they didn't exist, but the TPP has changed all that, and now we have what the Obama administration describes as a groundbreaking agreement, allowing for the free flow of data across borders and providing a bulwark against digital protectionism in the form of data localization requirements. Still, right now it's anyone's guess if the TPP will become a reality and if those groundbreaking provisions will ever take force. The Obama administration is basically betting on a vote in the lame duck session of Congress. If Clinton wins, it may be possible, but she's signaled she plans to pose a vote on the pact, but maybe that dynamic will persuade Republicans that this really is the last chance, and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan will work with President Barack Obama to put in place the last trade deal initiated by George W. Bush. It's harder for me to see a scenario where this deal gets approved in the lame duck session if Donald Trump becomes president, but I also believe just because I can't see the scenario, that doesn't mean it can't happen. I've seen the trade community on the Hill do some pretty fancy maneuvering to get agreements approved, and I've also seen the trade opponents be just as clever in blocking them. So in regards to trade agreements, the TPP has been bigger than usual. It's even had a 2-stage fight, beginning last year with a vote on trade promotion authority. The conventional wisdom was that TPP was going to be the easy half of the equation, that once lawmakers had the trade deal in hand and could see the benefits for their constituents, it would be relatively easy to pass TPP. But clearly opponents are organized and impassioned, and they're going to fight approval every step of the way, assuming it even comes up. Today I'm excited and a little nervous to be moderating this discussion with 5 experts on this issue who all come at it from different angles. I'm still learning some of those different angles, so please excuse me if I misstate them or make some erroneous presumption when I ask you a question. But let me start by just giving a brief introduction of who we have with us today. I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to go in the order I've written them instead of the orders that they're seated. But first, we have Burju Killage, who is the only woman on our panel, who is Legal and Policy Director at Public Citizen, where I first got to know her because of her work on one of the biggest issues in the TPP, which is access to medicines. She was an invaluable source of information on that issue and has been very helpful in getting me up to speed on their concerns about the digital provisions of the agreement. Sitting next to her in the black is Mark Rottenberg. He's president of the Electronic Privacy Information Center in Washington, D.C., and a faculty member at Georgetown Law School, where he teaches privacy law and open government. He has worked on internet policy issues for a wide range of national and international organizations, including the AAS, ABA, ICANN, IGF, NAS, OECD, and UNESCO. Finally, or rather next to him in the blue shirt, we have David Sneed, who is Board and Policy Working Group Chair of the Internet Infrastructure Coalition and a principal organizer of this event. David, I have to admit that I wasn't familiar with your group before this event, but I've learned that you were founded in 2012 by a diverse group of internet companies that build the nuts and bolts of the internet. And I found that out by Googling your name, which is how I do most of my reporting. Right next to me, we have Ari Giovinco, who is Director of Trade and International Policy for the Internet Association. He used to work for the Office of the Trade Representatives, and now he represents internet companies ranging from Airbnb to Zynga. There's a list of about 30 of them here. And then lastly, on the end here, we have Jamie White, who's a former independent record company producer. I couldn't resist including that. And now the top advisor to Senator Rod Wyden and the Finance Committee Democrats on international trade issues. He basically works for Oregon and the 49 other states. And Senator Wyden has been a leader in promoting trade on the internet, which he likes to call the shipping lane of the 21st century. And just one more comment before we get started, just to mention a couple of recent developments that have happened. One is a new report on trade and privacy that came out this week that argues that trade agreements are at odds with EU laws that protect privacy and data protections. It concludes that current measures used by the EU to safeguard its data protection laws in trade agreements are not sufficient, and it represents a comprehensive exemption for data protection rules in all trade agreements based on an article of the GATS agreement. That study was done by researchers at the University of Amsterdam, and it was commissioned by the Transatlantic Consumer Dialogue, the European Consumer Organization, and US and EU digital rights groups. Lastly, earlier this year, and I think David and Burju will probably talk about this, there was a meeting of internet users, consumers, innovative businesses, cultural institutions. They all came together to talk about this issue. They produced a document that's called the Brussels Declaration on Trade and the Internet, which among other things calls for the regular release of draft proposals and consolidated text in trade negotiations to enable stakeholders to be fully informed and participate in the negotiating process. At that meeting, participants were asked to rank a long list of ideas based on whether they agreed with them or not on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being total agreement. The most popular idea to come out of that was releasing consolidated text after each negotiating round for public comment. That received a score of 8.57. Two other popular ideas were the creation of some kind of funding mechanism for travel and capacity buildings at organizations, and some sort of funding mechanism for groups to be able to travel to attend these negotiating rounds, which can sometimes last for 3 to 5 years. Those received scores of around 7.5. And then other ideas that got scores of 6 or higher were providing regular training on the issues for relevant government officials and policy-making bodies, doing research to challenge business research and reports, compiling a list of best national and international practices in trade negotiations, and then campaigning to spread such practices, and seeking national level legislation to ban or put limits on the revolving door problem of trade negotiators coming or going from industry jobs. So that's sort of, hopefully is a bit of a scene setter. I'm just going to start with David, and then we'll hear briefly from each of our panelists. David, you were one of the principal organizers. Could you say a few words about why you felt this was an important discussion to have at this time?
Sure. So I appreciate everybody coming here, and Doug, that was a great foundation for why Burju and I suggested this for IGF. At the meeting that we had in Brussels, one of the key things that we discussed was the opportunity that the multi-stakeholder and the internet governance models that have developed for the internet might provide for helping overcome what have been identified as transparency problems in the trade negotiation process. And so we thought that this IGF-USA would be a great opportunity to bring people in to build on the Brussels Declaration and talk about some of the ideas that came out of it, some of the ones that Doug talked about, the high-rated ones, others that were not so highly rated, like, for example, crowdsourcing trade agreements, which is one thing that we also discussed. We also discussed having ICANN fund the rest of the internet, which I thought was a very interesting idea as well. But this is a really great opportunity and a really open forum to discuss how we might change the trade agreement negotiation and establishment process to better deal with some of the issues that have been raised around TPP.
Okay, great. Burju, I know that Public Citizen has been one of the most prominent critics of the TPP and other trade agreements. Just in a nutshell, what are your criticisms of the TPP? Is it as much about the way the issues were decided as the process itself?
Yeah. My organization has been really active in the TPP negotiations, and as Doug mentioned, I spent the last 5 years of my life traveling around to TPP countries, talking to the negotiators, and trying analyzing the text. And our main focus was intellectual property chapter, because it was one of the most contentious chapters of the TPP. And we were lucky because the text was leaked a couple of times, so we could see what's going on in the negotiations, and then we can approach to the negotiators and tell them that, look, this provision has certain implications. And so the discussion about the intellectual property chapter and other issues like access to medicines, access to knowledge, have been really, really popular during the TPP negotiations. But I call the e-commerce chapter as the little kept secret of the TPP, because we could only see the chapter when the text was released. But during the negotiations, the parties, the USTR and the other governments like Australia, they raised the issue of the e-commerce chapters, but we never had a chance to follow the e-commerce chapter and what's going on there. I never talked to the e-commerce chapter negotiators until they closed the chapter. So, and when the text came out, we realized that, great, there are certain innovations in the text. That's how USTR promotes the text, like the cross-border data transfer provision, or the ban on local server computing facilities, or the protection of personal information. But the problem is, as Doug mentioned, this report came out this week from our European partners. the problem is the exceptions. The exception language is very, very problematic, and we never had that discussion. So the text came out, and we saw the exception language, and they borrowed the exception language from the GATS agreement, and that language never works because the countries try to use that language in the WTO for WTO obligations 44 times, and then they failed 43 times. So we know that the language doesn't work in the WTO. And now we are talking about WTO plus obligation, but we haven't talked about the exceptions. I mean, Mark is sitting next to me, and he's like the biggest name in the US when it comes to privacy and data protection. And I asked Mark when I first came here, Mark, have they approached you? Have they asked you about this chapter? Like, you know, we are going to introduce this rule, but it has implications for privacy, and we have this weak exception, and which became clear that with this report, it's not going to work. Have they asked you? No. So that's the point. Like, they haven't asked us. My organization represents the consumers. No one approached us and ask us. So that can be a good thing for the industry, for the businesses, but like when it comes to the people and the consumers, I think, you know, like the TPP is like, the TPP commerce chapter fails to protect the privacy and data protection of the US consumers and the US citizens, and of course the other TPP, the citizens of the other TPP parties. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And Ari, I guess I would turn to you next. Your organization, I believe, has a different view of the TPP. You guys have come out in support of it. Could you talk about a little bit why you think it is a good agreement?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Doug. You know, I think that when we're, again, just a little primer on who we are. We represent nearly 40 internet companies that are operating worldwide, and really our goal is to promote growth, innovation, and protect a free and open internet. We think that international trade is essential. Our sector is worth about 6% of GDP, nearly $1 trillion yearly. And with over 3 billion worldwide consumers online, we really think that it's essential when many of our businesses are doing much of their business overseas now that we have the protections in place in trade agreements to allow small businesses to be able to access these markets in a frictionless way. The small businesses that are relying on the transfer of data, on the ability to make sure that there's seamless customs procedures for goods that are flowing, services that are flowing, really reduces the frictions and allows our member companies and the users and sellers of our user companies to really reach these markets and take advantage. You know, in terms of TPP, we believe you know, there's a few different areas that we looked at in our contemplation of supporting the agreement. One of which I just mentioned on the small business and custom side, we're very happy there. In terms of intellectual property, we believe that the copyright provisions struck the appropriate balance, the fair and reasonable exceptions and limitations to copyright. And really, we believe that these safe harbors, which are critical to protecting the functionality of the internet, whether it's search engines or social media or other e-commerce services, we believe these are really the bedrock foundation of the internet, and we're happy to see this. You know, in terms of the agreement, yeah, as you mentioned, Doug, historically, trade agreements really haven't dealt with digital trade. There have been several provisions over the years, but you know, we agree there's more that can be done in this space. I think that we're looking at ways to build on TPP, ways to help combat digital protectionism in markets like China, Russia, India, where we're seeing a segmented internet, a balkanized internet in many of those markets. And we also think that there's other places that provide safe harbors in U.S. law that we can really build on what again has come about in TPP, including Communications and Decency Act, Section 230. We really believe that this is a tool for promoting democratic discourse around the world and promoting free expression online. So So in terms of the agreement, those are some of the pieces that we looked at when we were considering support.
Okay, thanks very much. Mark, I thought I'd turn to you for a few comments. Where does EPIC come down in this debate? Are your concerns mainly about threats to privacy for consumers? Are you also worried about the transparency of the process as well?
Well, thank you.